Hey everyone, welcome back to Corporate Decoder, the place where we decode the financial mysteries of the business world. And today get ready because we're diving into ALLETE's latest report and it looks like they've been busy borrowing some serious cash to fund their big plans. Scroll ALLETE Inc.'s exact name of registrant as specified. In its charter, Sai Scroll Kiso, ALLETE is a company that's involved in energy and utility services. And like many large corporations, they often need outsider money to keep their projects moving. This report is all about a big financial move they made on July 9, 2025. What's a bond? Well, think of it like this. ALLETE is basically borrowing money from big investment groups and promising to pay them back with interest over time. This time around, they borrowed a whopping $250 million by selling these things called first mortgage bonds. They sold these to what they call institutional accredited investors, which is just a fancy way of saying they sold them to big financial companies, not to individuals like you or me. This was done in a private placement market, which means it's a bit less public than selling shares on the stock market. Scroll maturity, date till principal amount, tablet interest rate scroll. Now let's look at the details of this borrowing. They didn't just get one big loan, they split it up into 4 different groups of bonds, each with a different payback date or maturity date and a different interest rate. This is pretty common to manage their cash flow and interest payments over time. Scroll July 9, $2030 million ESEIC Pors Cove 537 Porch Scroll Keat. So first up, they have $50 million in bonds that are due in July of 27%. July 9, 2035 x $75 million 35 tough 79 Porch Scroll Cup. Then for $75 million, they've got bonds due in July of 2035 with a slightly higher interest rate of 5.69%. Scroll July 9, 2050 $20 million each U, July of 2079 Poise Scroll U. Next, they borrowed another $50 million due in July of 2037 at an interest rate of 5.79%. Scroll July 9, 2055, all $75 million to way at in July of 2634 Poor Scroll. And finally, they have a big chunk of $75 million due way out in July of 25, and this one has the highest interest rate at 6.34%. So you can see a pattern here. The longer they borrow, the higher the interest rate they have to pay. This is pretty standard in the world of finance because lending money for a longer time is generally riskier. How do they pay the interest? Well, they're going to pay it twice a year, every January 15th and July 15th, starting in January of 2026. And what's all this money for? ALLETE says they plan to use these funds to pay for their utility capital expenditures. Basically, they're going to use this borrowed money to invest in upgrading and expanding their infrastructure, their power plants, their grids, and all that good stuff that keeps the lights on. This is a pretty common reason for utility companies to take on debt like this. It's about investing in the future. Now you'll see a lot of jargon in these filings, but some of it is just technical stuff for the SEC. For instance, this reference to a cover page interactive data file is just how they submit the information digitally. Scroll forward, looking statements capped. Statements in this report that are not statements of historical facts are considered forward-looking. Scroll. This next part is super important though. It's the forward-looking statement section. This is where ALLETE is basically telling everyone, look, some of the things we might say or imply in this report are about the future, and the future is uncertain. They're giving themselves a bit of a shield here. What they're saying is that while they have plans and expectations, things like economic slowdowns, changes in regulations, natural disasters, or even cyber attacks could mess with their actual results. They list a whole bunch of these potential risks, things like whether they can actually stick to their game plan or how economic conditions at home and abroad might affect them. They're also worried about inflation and if they can get the materials and supplies they need. And with all this borrowing, you can bet they're keeping a close eye on their ability to get more money from banks or the markets if they need it down the road. Commodity prices like fuel costs can really impact them and their customers. Then there's a big section on government actions. Regulators and lawmakers can really influence utility companies dictating their allowed profits, how they structure their finances, their ability to borrow money, and even things like where they can build or sell facilities. Environmental matters are also a big piece of this. They also mention a potential merger. It looks like ALLETE might be acquired by something called Alloy Parent. This part is pretty complex, but it highlights the risk that getting all the necessary government and regulatory approvals for this merger might be a hurdle. If they can't get those approvals, or if conditions are too tough, the whole deal could be delayed, changed, or even called off. This is a pretty significant risk they're flagging. And if the merger does go ahead but things are rocky, it could negatively affect ALLETE's business operations and financial health. They really want investors to do their homework and look at all the risks. They're reminding everyone that things can change and past performance is not a guarantee of future success. ALLETE INC 5 2ISUS. Colin B. Anderson .ur Fall Plan 2025 Casio EIS President, Chief Accounting Officer and Controller. This tells us that the numbers presented have been reviewed by a high-level finance executive within the company. Now, my take on all this, ALLETE is definitely making moves to invest in its future, which is generally a good sign. This bond issuance shows they're actively managing their finances to fund these large-scale projects. Borrowing $250 million is a substantial amount, and locking in those interest rates for varying terms shows a strategic approach to managing their debt. However, the sheer number of risks they've outlined, especially around potential regulatory changes and that ongoing merger situation, are definitely things to watch closely. The success of their capital expenditures will be key to seeing if this borrowing pays off. If they can execute their plans efficiently and navigate those potential regulatory bumps, their future looks promising. But if they stumble on those risks, things could get tougher. It's a classic case of investing for growth, but also taking on significant financial and operational risks. Alright, that's our breakdown of ALLETE's latest filing. What's your take on these numbers and what they signal for the company's future? Drop your thoughts in the comments. If this analysis was valuable, hitting that like button really helps, and subscribe for more deep dives. Don't forget to check out the Discord in the description. Thanks for watching. See you next time.